This is Changing the Coalfields. My name is Brandon Dennison. I'm your host. And today I have a fellow Coalfield development colleague, Gina Milum, who has worn a lot of different hats at Coalfield Development that you'll hear about, but currently leads our arts and outreach efforts at the West Edge Factory, which is the biggest of our many properties, where we do creative placemaking and support new businesses and social enterprises and training. And Gina, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Well, I'm excited to get started. There's all kinds of things happening down there at the West Edge Factory and so many things happen in Southern West Virginia. I'm just really excited to talk about what's going on.
Love it. Yeah. So, and this is a chance to let people know what's up at West Edge. I think before we dive into all that, tell folks what West Edge is today, and then we'll sort of work backwards. And I'd love to hear, you actually have some very personal connections to this building. So tell us what it is today, and then we'll back up and learn about what it used to be.
Today, the West Edge Factory is just a dynamo of different enterprises. I mean, it's almost like an anthill. It doesn't look like there's a whole lot going on from outside. But as soon as you walk through those doors, you've got 3 different enterprises that are just pumping along like pistons in a 8-cylinder engine. Yeah. We've got Mountain Mindful. They're printing T-shirts. They're making furniture and all types of things, wood goods, if you want to call them that.
Lifestyle brand. Yeah.
A lifestyle brand out of reclaimed wood. We've got a warehouse for solar hauler down there, which was started out as one of Coalfields' enterprises, and is out on their own. They're currently the #1 solar installers in the state of West Virginia. It's incredible. We've got venue space, and of course, I mean, my heart is in the turret gallery there, and that's where I'm doing most of my work now.
The art gallery.
The art gallery, yes. We've got workshops going on in there all the time. I'm expecting 60 kids in there tomorrow from Lincoln and Logan County to do an art workshop. Wow. It's just constant. We've got a prom that's going to be happening there in April. And
who's having their prom there? That's amazing.
That would be Chesapeake High School is having their prom.
That is so cool.
And I mean, we're already thinking about an adult prom in there. We've got our artist in residence is Sassa Wilkes, and they currently have an exhibit at the Huntington Museum of Art, 100 Badass Women. And yes, this is a big plug for that. You've got to get out there and see it. It's gotten national attention, and it is truly incredible. Sassa is our artist in residence. We have an artist in residence mentee with Barb LaValle Benton, and we have Kat Pleska, who is a professor here at Marshall. They are another artist in residence. She does a lot of the literary work, helps me with the poetry workshops and the writing workshops, and hopefully, one day, a literary festival down there. So that's just an idea of some of the stuff that's going on down there. I mean, there's trainings for the community. It's just constant.
So folks are listening, you can rent out space in this awesome factory.
Can. There are 2 different spaces.
Art shows, music festivals, cornhole tournaments.
Yes.
Alumni reunions.
We've got 14,000 square feet.
Yep.
And I don't know, I mean, if there are people out there listening that are like me, which that doesn't mean a whole lot. When you just start throwing square footage at me, it doesn't mean much. But when I tell you it's about the size of 4 gymnasiums, full-size gymnasiums, and that's not counting the turret gallery, which can hold up to 50 people for smaller things, like say it's a shower or a small business meeting. We do workshops for businesses that want to do team building. We've got all sorts of things that go on down there. Compared to when I first heard about Coalfield and I first met Brandon, and it had been a huge vacant hulking magnet for mischief in the community, which had been empty for
12 years.
12 years. And there was just constantly, cops were having to circle the place. There were always kids in there. Of course, every bit of any kind of copper, wiring, plumbing, it had been gone. There had been small fires set in there, people running around on the roof. It had just been just a pain, a thorn in the community side. And so, from when I grew up in that neighborhood, just a half a mile from the old Corbin factory, which was a men's clothing factory. And there.
So just for folks who don't know, what is today West Edge used to be the Corbin clothing factory.
Yes. And my mother had worked there. So back in the 80s, my mother had worked there, but I had grown up driving past that place twice a day, every day for my entire life.
One of the biggest employers in town.
Right. And it predominantly employed women. Mm-hmm. And these were good, union jobs where women were able to make a decent living. So, there were as many, when the shift changed, if you were there, if you needed to go by that place at 7 a.m. or at 4 p.m., just be prepared to wait because it was going to be a madhouse.
Yep.
But to go from seeing that, every day of your life to just it being completely vacant and just wondering what would happen. What
was that like from the community perspective? Because it was a slow dwindle, right? So Corbin in the 70s employed nearly 1,000 people, mostly women, 3 8-hour shifts, ran 24 hours a day. And then the 80s, they cut back. The 90s, they halved it. And then by 2002, they closed it entirely and the jobs outsourced to South America. Could the community sense that slow dwindle, or was it still a shock when the doors closed for good?
No, because it was already impacting the community too.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't just Corbin.
Yeah.
There is the old Black Diamond factory, that's just half a block from there that had run 3 shifts as well. And you heard that constant stamping, in the 60s, in the 70s, in the 80s. Westmoreland had always been, a working class neighborhood, never really middle class, but, a good, steady working class community.
People own their homes.
People own their homes. You usually had one parent that worked outside the home. You had another parent that was in. There was PTO involvement, lots of involvement in the schools and in the sporting activities and the community activities. And then in the 80s, when you started seeing these jobs leaving, there was Owens, there was Hudai, there was the steel plant started to downsize and Maidenform and the shoe factory, all these factories that had really made Huntington a dynamo. When they started to close, the community started to close. And people at first, the first wave went with those factories as Owens closed down and they took those jobs into Virginia. There's the first wave of migration. Then CSX starts to cut back, and then those jobs go, to Baltimore and Jacksonville. So fewer and fewer people living in the community, more and more rental property. The community got older. Less local ownership, fewer children in the schools, a smaller tax base, and you could see that in the community.
And the substance use crisis, I imagine, starts to seep its way in.
Yeah. And, of course, the decline started long before that. It was with sending the jobs offshore. But then once you basically hauled out a community, when most of the good jobs, if it hadn't been for Marshall University, if it hadn't been, for the fact that Huntington is a regional medical center, you just think how many employers were left here. Mm-hmm. There weren't that many employers left. Mm-hmm. So you basically hauled out a community where you've gone, where most people could get a good job in this area, to where it's just gone. And when those jobs go, a lot of the hope goes. Then you've got a lot of the really manual labor jobs that are left. And then we were just ripe we were just ripe for the pickings with the pharmaceutical companies to come in. And I mean, I remember the very first time I had ever heard the word OxyContin. I was watching an episode of Law and Order. I mean, this was back in the Lenny Brusco days, you know, when Law and Order first started. Seems like it's been on television for 50 years. And they were talking about deaths in New York. And I know this was back in the early 90s. And they were calling, I heard the term hillbilly heroin. They're bringing this stuff up here from Appalachia.
Wow.
And so that's when it started. And the difference between, like, I graduated, you know, from Vincent High School, which is right there in the community where West Edge is. And my children did too. You know, they graduated from Vincent. And then, of course, when the school consolidated and they went to Spring Valley, I'm getting ready to have a 45th high school reunion this year. I can count on probably one hand, and no more than two, the number of my schoolmates that have died. And, you know, it's from the typical things. I mean, you have maybe a couple of car wrecks, you know, some cancers, heart attacks, that sort of thing, the general thing. But then when my kids get together and they started, the oldest one graduated in 95, all the way down to 2005, they can't even, I mean, it goes on and on. We're talking 20, 30 kids out of a class, out of each one of their classes. Yeah. It's just unbelievable.
It's a decimation.
Mm-hmm.
Really. I know the documentary Heroin struck a chord for you almost too close to home in some ways.
Well, I had actually moved. I have a son that lives in Maui, and I thought, well, you know, I'm going to have this great.
Let's try that.
Let's try this. You know, my house was paid for, and I didn't have anything to do. You know, so I'm just going to go out and try living in Maui. So while I'm out there, of course, you know, it was beautiful all the time, and but you know, once you get this. Once you've been raised a hillbilly, I mean, I used to watch that barn raiser show that's based on in Lewisburg, I think it is, just so I could hear people talk like me. I mean, and I was just really getting homesick. And then the documentary, it's a Academy Award nominated documentary, Heroines, and it was all about Huntington. And you've got all these places, you know, and people that I knew, you know, like Jan Rader and, you know, all these other people. And I would invite the people that, you know, my friends and colleagues that I worked with in Maui. I said, oh, you've got to watch this documentary. It's about the place where I'm from. And so then, I mean, I'm proud of the women, you know, that are being highlighted in this, and knowing, you know, the hearts of the people and how hard we work and how dedicated we can be, you know, in our love and our outreach. And so then I'm starting to get feedback from these people, you know, that don't know anything about West Virginia, probably couldn't find it on a map. Yeah. And they're telling me, I mean, I'll never forget, one of them said, aren't you glad you don't live there anymore? Mm. And my heart just broke. I mean, it was almost, I could almost physically feel something snap in me. And now keep in mind, I had 3 close friends lose children to this epidemic while I was there. This was just after I'd been in Maui a year and a half. And it's like, I can do something. Mm-hmm. I can do something. I mean, whether it's just to go back and give some encouragement to somebody, I can do something. So everybody in Hawaii thought I was absolutely insane, but I just packed up everything and basically sent everything the same way back that I'd sent it over, which was through the U.S. Post Office. Give them a big plug. They did a great job. And I came home. Yeah. And I have never looked back. I got the job with Coalfield, you know, soon after, because I had met Brandon and become aware of Coalfield before I left, like the year before I moved to Maui. And
I've always meant to ask you that. So we met in 2014. We just bought the old Corbin building, had a vision to turn it into West Edge, and we met at a community meeting. Mm-hmm. And so there was an intermission there where we met, and then you were in Maui for a little bit.
Right.
Came back.
Came back, yeah. And I started work. I moved in 2016 and 2015. I moved in 2015 and drove cross country, put my car on a ship and flew to Maui, and then came back in December of 2017. So, and then I started work with Coalfield in 2018.
Gotcha. So tell folks about that community meeting from your perspective and the community's perspective.
Well, everybody's nosy. I mean, I'm going to admit it. I mean, I'm one of the nosiest people I know. And when you live in a community, and so many times people aren't informed about what's going in, it's like you're going to get what we give you and you're going to like it, and the community doesn't have any input. So there had been all sorts of rumors. I mean, there was going to be everything from salvage yards to low-income housing to, just all different kinds of things. So the community really wanted to know. So it was almost like me and the person I went with, Luke Huffman, who also works, at Coalfield. We were almost the community delegation that was sent to scope this out and then come back and let everybody, see what's going on. So we get there and I meet Brandon, and he's this young guy, and all these other guys are up there, and they from an architectural firm, and then I get Deacon Stone. He worked with you. He was a big part of the beginning of the work there at West Edge.
Founding property manager.
Yeah. And so the community's there. Brandon introduces himself. He tells us a little bit about Coalfield, and then they take and they put up on the wall the footprint of the building. And he's got the architectural firm there. And then they take paper and put over it, kind of like tracing paper. You can see the floor plan of the building, the original footprint. And then Brandon just turns around and looks at the community and says, "What do you want in here?" And I looked at Luke and he looked at me, and it's just like, you mean we've got some say? We're going to be able to have some input as to what we want to go in here? And then it was just like popcorn. People are popping
Game
out.
on.
Game on. It's like, okay, yeah, we want jobs in there.
In the architecture world, this is called a charrette.
Yes. And that's back in the days when I thought a charrette was the car I drove to prom. So I've learned so many words since then, but it was just incredible. It's just like, yeah, we want jobs and we want training and we want art, everything from sound studios to artist studios to theaters. And so Brandon's just letting them write it up there. It's like, well, how much room do you need? And where do you think it would be? And I'll never forget this to my dying day. Because it sits right near the railroad tracks, and the debate that went on about the trains. Well, can we have this? And I just stood up and, I said, I volunteer to call CSX and get the train schedule so we can move this discussion along. And I think that might have given Brandon an idea about what my personality was like all those years ago. So he can't say he wasn't warned. But it was just amazing. And so then Luke and I left that meeting, and I said, Luke, his mother just lived at like 2 houses down at that time. He goes, every time those doors are open, every time you see anybody over there, I said, you need to go over there and see what they're doing, because we're going to see if this guy's really doing what he says he's going to do. Mm-hmm. And so here I am. How many years later? Is that 8, 9 years later? Sitting here with you, and I can tell you, as we work on the Black Box Theater, as we speak, the last promise that Brandon and Coalfield made my community is being realized.
It's awesome. Yeah.
It is awesome. And thank you, and thank Coalfield.
Yeah, of course. Follow through. But thank you to the community for keeping us honest and really for buying in. That building really belongs to the community, which is special.
Yeah. Well, and it's not just, we're doing the same thing, and I'm actually getting to do what, I'm getting to hold my own charrettes. So as we acquired Brandon's got a mouse in his pocket, but as Coalfield acquired the Black Diamond property, we've done the same thing. Open it up to the community. What do you want to see? What do you want changed? We want to let the community know what's going on, and the community has really responded. Yeah. I know we've got advisory boards, both at Black Diamond and then I've got an advisory board, an arts advisory board there at West Edge, and we hold meetings to make sure that the community knows what's going on, that the community has input and a say-so, and just keeping everybody in the loop.
So let's go back to the beginning now. So it's a beautiful intro to hear. I mean, Gina, the work you do is so fantastic, and this building has just come back alive. It's been revitalized, and now it's in our mission statement. We talk about perceived liabilities becoming community assets, and West Edge is the epitome of that. And you're at the point of the spear. So thank you. What was it like growing up in Westmoreland back when it used to have all these factories humming? And what was your family situation? What were you into as a kid?
Well, both my parents worked, so we did pretty. I mean, I was looking back on it. I was a spoiled kid. The money was never an issue. I mean, this is back when everybody would get up on a Saturday, catch the bus, go downtown. Downtown Huntington was thriving. Department stores. I mean, Anderson Newcomb's and
bakeries,
theaters, restaurants, movie theaters. There were like 5 different movie theaters. I mean, all over town, not just all of them in one place like Pullman, which Pullman's great. But everybody all the kids rode the bus and went downtown. And that was just what you did. You went to Davidson's record store and you bought your 45s or I remember the very first album that I ever bought was Yellow Brick Road. Was Elton John's Yellow Brick Road.
That's a good first one.
Yes.
That's a good first one.
We used to have great concerts.
Mine was Matchbox 20. It's a lot lamer.
No, I like Matchbox 20. I love him.
It was a CD by then. But
oh, yeah. But we used to have amazing concerts that came here. I remember at the Memorial Fieldhouse, which is where the soccer complex is now. That's where the first concert that I ever saw, was able to go by myself anyway, was to a Kiss concert in 1975.
No way.
Yes. I saw Aerosmith and Queen.
Wow.
I mean, I guess, but because of, the proximity, to venues like Cincinnati and Columbus. And I mean, if you were going to go from Cincinnati or Columbus and go anywhere like Roanoke or...
Got to go through 64.
You got to go 64. So it's just like, hey, why don't we stop in this? And the population was more. I mean, wasn't it? I mean,
oh yeah, in the 70s, Huntington had nearly population, 80-some thousand, pushing 90 in the 70s.
And that's just in the metropolitan area.
Fast forward to 2020 is 49,000, so nearly cut in half.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's city limits. That's not counting greater area.
Right.
It's the story. It is the illustration of the industrial decline of Middle America in a lot of ways, and hopefully the industrial renewal of Middle America too.
Exactly. I mean, just like walking into West Edge right now, and knowing that over top of our heads, there are almost 300 solar panels.
Yeah.
And to know that it is already in this old building that's over 100 years old. There's parts of it that are over 100 years old, that we're on the cutting edge of the new green technology.
Yeah.
I really take a point of pride with that, especially as I take people on tours through the building. I will stop them there and I'll just, point both fingers up and go right over top of our heads are 300 solar panels offsetting our energy needs at West Edge. So to know that we're helping revive an entire region.
Mm-hmm.
I had been in sales and marketing for 35 years. Yeah, I'm sure some of the things I sold were worthwhile, but a whole lot of them weren't. But now, as I know, as I sunset my career, I mean, I'm probably going to be like 95, and you're going to have to say, somebody come get her. She's escaped and she's coming. But to know that my kids even talk about it, just how I talk about the work that I do and how happy I am to know that I'm finally being able to give back to a region and a community that I love so much.
Were you always so outgoing?
Always.
Were you in theater in high school?
I did. Well, kind of. We didn't really have theater. We had like speech classes. I wrote a play that we performed in front of the whole school. It was called The Connie Jarson Show. Guess who was Connie Jarson?
That's great. Not at all surprised.
And then, of course, there was Edna McMahon, and, we had all different kinds. I mean, of the celebrities back then, just kind of takes on everything from Charo to Burt Reynolds. And I don't even remember some of the names that I'd given them, but of course, I got to write the whole thing. But then the speech class comes up and we go to the theater and City Hall, and we do a Christmas Carol. Mm-hmm. So the teacher, the speech teacher says, Gina, you talk all the time in all the classes. You are going to be the ghost of Christmas future. All I did was stand there in a sheet that had been dyed black and pointed. It killed me to be on that stage. Yes, it killed me to be on that stage and not get to...
That's hilarious.
To talk.
Have you always loved to read? I know you're a big reader. You've set up a whole library at West Edge for Coalfield staff and crew and trainees to have access to.
Oh, yeah. I always loved to read. I mean, my earliest memories are my mother reading to me and reading the classics. So it would be, we would be reading, Little Men, Little Women, Black Beauty, Robinson Crusoe. I mean, when I'm like 4 or 5 years old. By the time I was in the 3rd grade, I don't know, they used to have these little biographies, and they were bound in had an orange binding. And so I could spot them, and each classroom had their own library. But I had been given permission by the time I was in the 4th grade to go into any classroom and pick any book that I wanted to, because I had
just devoured books.
I just loved it.
You like biographies still, right?
Yes.
Favorite 1 or 2 or 3 you had to pick?
Isaac Denison, the woman who Out of Africa, the movie Out of Africa is written about.
Okay.
If a lot of people might have seen the movie that starred Meryl Streep and Robert Redford, but the biography, well, it was actually her. She told it herself, Isaac Denison. It was absolutely incredible. And another one, which is basically, ironically, it's in the same era. They're in Eastern Africa. Beryl Markham. Everybody talks about, she was an early aviator, and she flew did a lot of her flying in Eastern Africa, in Kenya. Her parents had moved her there, but everyone knows that Lindbergh was the first aviator to fly across the Atlantic, right. And he did it west to east, which is easier. Beryl Markham was the first person to fly east to west. And she was a woman, and you don't hear anything. She was mad as a hatter about a whole lot of other ways, and she had actually been a contemporary of Isaac Denison.
Okay.
And but both of those probably are going to pop out to me, because they're just. I think it's the adventure and it's the exotic locations, because I'm a big traveler, and they were women.
So did you go straight into sales and marketing right out of high school?
Right out of high school, no. I became a wife and a mother. Mm-hmm. And so where did I go to work? I went to work at a law firm. I got divorced, went back to school. I was a returning student. So, I went back to school after I had my kids, and then I went to work at a local law firm. I was their law librarian.
All right.
And the dead file clerk. So that's where I met Margaret Mary. She and I worked together at the law firm. And so I got to put all the supplements in all the law books. So I got to be around books all the time. And I was actually studying for a paralegal degree here at Marshall at the same time. So that's what I did first. And then I took a job as I was the office administrator for an insurance company that sold Medicare supplements and life insurance. So I was licensed and, had an insurance license and then I went to work. I moved from that into sales. I went to work at the Herald Dispatch in sales there. And then.
What's it like? So you were a single mother? For a time, what's that like?
It's busy.
Yeah,
you were busy. I had gone from being, this spoiled kid who had her own charge accounts at the Smart Shop and the Stone Thomas and the Princess Shop, from the time she was 12 on, to being, if I found a 50 cents in the dryer, I was hooping and hollering. So, but trying to work and go to school and raise 3 kids and make sure that, they were involved and weren't doing what they had not to do and tried to, I think they conspired to, drive me insane or kill me a few times, but I survived and they all did too. They've all, went to school here at Marshall and graduated. I've got 2 of them have master's degrees. They're all doing well. So, it wasn't easy. And there are times, I don't remember a whole lot, but we got through it. And,
you did good, Mom.
Well, they almost killed me, but we got it done.
One of the things, we were on a tour together at West Edge. I can't remember who it was, but you made the comment, sometimes, I think you said sometimes people just need a big old hug from grandma.
Yeah.
Or something like that.
A mama hug.
The mama hug. The value of encouragement and support.
Yeah. And I know how much it's meant to me at certain times in my life. And we work with the population, with people that have, not only are they at risk, but they have been at risk a lot of times their entire lives. And maybe they haven't had anyone to encourage them or give them a pat on the back or give them a hug or, and that can go a long way.
It matters, yeah.
It does matter. And if just take the time to get to know their name and ask them about what they're, how they're doing or joke with them or it really means something to them and it brightens my day too.
Of course. So what are you feeling most excited about for 2023 and for West Edge? I am getting to build an art program from the ground up. Something that to actually put something in place where nothing was there before. So that to me is so exciting. It's a little bit scary, but it's also so exciting. Chance to create.
Just to create. And I was so touched. We recently, everyone at Coalfield went on a retreat right before Christmas where everybody, I think you would ask everybody to give 3 things about this past year, that they had really enjoyed or that had really impacted them. And almost every single person mentioned something about the arts. And that just really, gave me wings. It's like, so what I'm doing is having an impact. People are really being positively affected by this. And so it's just like, hey, I also challenged myself too. It's like, Gina, you really got to up your game. This has got to be good this year.
Well, and it's interesting. We're not a traditional arts organization in a traditional sense. We're not an art museum or art academy, but we do community economic development. And I think what we've discovered is arts is an incredible tool to achieve economic community development. It's like if I say, hey, community, come to a meeting versus, hey, community, come to a art festival workshop, or a music festival workshop, what would you be more inclined to do? What's more fun and interesting? But the outcomes are the same. We build relationships. We learn what's on people's hearts and minds and what people want out of life and in their community. And then the creativity, the modern economy, it's not about how many widgets can you produce and how quickly. It really is about how can you create innovative solutions to complex problems. And it's a creative process. It's not a linear mechanical process, or at least it's not that alone. And so it's been really cool to leverage the arts as a tool. It's almost become a thread throughout so much of our work that makes it unique and compelling.
Well, if you think about, just the traditional Appalachian economies, even they've always been supplemented by the things that we make.
A great point.
And Appalachians will always say they might not call themselves an artist,
right,
but they consider themselves a maker of things. And we all have, that uncle or that someone we know that whittles or carves, or the grandmother
or
that
tinkers
or
on
tinkers.
A car or a tractor, yeah.
That's all creative
Quilting,
endeavors.
canning.
Yes, all those things. And what it does, it stimulates parts of your brain that make you more resilient, that make you see the problems that you encounter in different ways. It's just like, I can't go at this straight ahead. But, if I just take 2 steps over and angle it this way and come back around, just like if you were building a piece of furniture, or if you were, and if you look at how they've always supplemented our economies, and they still do, that's another element in our economy. It's the makers, it's the singers, Huntington has an amazing music scene.
Yeah.
People are making money doing that. People sell. We had an amazing Christmas market this year. And I know I had wrestled with, how am I going to work this around Black Friday and, Small Business Saturday? And then it dawned on me, it's like, why do I have to give these big box stores the first shot at people's, Christmas money? No, we're going to do this on Black Friday, but we're going to call it Black Friday. And we had 50 vendors, and those people made money.
That's great.
So you got to look at it that way. And I know we're going to be able to sell the artists' work that, when they come in exhibit, they will have their work there on consignment. We recently, Brad Smith, right here. He came into our he brought a tour through with you. I forget who had come through, and we'd taken him into the gallery, and there were 2 pieces of art there by Sassa Wilkes,
our artist in residence.
And he fell in love with them. He came to the market the next day. It was he came to our Christmas market with him and his wife and his 2 daughters, and bought 2 of those pieces.
That's awesome.
Those were his Christmas presents to his daughter.
Gina, thanks for everything you do. Thanks for just being a great citizen in the community, a wonderful mentor and encourager to our crew members, our trainees, and a steward of the West Edge factory, which really has become important to not just Westmoreland, not just Huntington, not just Wayne County, but really the whole region. It's become a cornerstone for the new Appalachian economy. And you've been right in the mix of it, and I'm grateful.
Well, thank you, and thank Coalfield for giving me keep getting me off the streets.
Yeah.
Thank you, Brandon.
Keep at it.